Okay, so to start us off, we have calculator help. So what we're going to write at the top of this is just to remind ourselves when we look at this, that Avogadro's number is written in scientific notation. So just go ahead and write up at the top scientific notation. Okay, so scientific notation. Scientific notation is just when you have a number times 10 to another number. All right, so anytime that you see it written this way, that's in scientific notation. Okay, so right from the start, before I even talk about typing in the number, looking at your calculator that you have, you can put your calculator into scientific notation by hitting the two buttons that we're going to write down. So second and DRG. When you hit second DRG, and the reason we're doing this with this calculator is because this is the only one that you're allowed to use on tests and things, right? So you might as well, know how to do that in here. When you get home, I'll show you the Google one that you can also use, all right? But for second DRG, when you hit those two buttons, you get these options. You get flow, sci, engineering. We're never going to be putting it on engineering, but you have the option between flow and sci. Flow is going to be usually what you should be on, and right now I would recommend that you have it on that setting. Scientific, or sci, is going to put it into this notation that we just wrote at the top, okay? So I recommend usually have it in this. If you have something that looks odd, like you just multiplied 10 times 50 and it's telling you 5.0, and you're like, okay, I know 10 times 50 isn't 5, right? It's probably in scientific, so go check that setting, okay? Because it usually has something off to the side that says times 10 to the, and then it can have like 7, okay? So keep that in mind that you have that option. Are there any questions on that? Is everybody in flow right now? Good, good, good. Cool. All right, so Avogadro's number. We just saw in that video that we watched, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles. And it's really, you can use it for anything. Like you saw in the video, he said donuts, right? And pennies and basketballs and things like that. So you can use it for anything in chemistry, and what you're going to be using it for in here is a conversion to particles. Particles are going to be atoms, molecules, formula units. So we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about typing this in. When you type it into one of our calculators that you can use on the tests, okay, this is what I recommend, and I really strongly encourage you to embrace the E. So it's going to be 6.02, and we're going to put a capital E in the center, and then we're going to go 23. So let's talk about that E to begin with. What did that E just take the place of? Like, what does E represent? Times 10, and then some sort of an exponent. So E, you're going to be using it for times 10 and then to something, okay? So keep that in mind as you start getting crazy numbers. Like if you open up your little page, you can kind of see on the inside, one of your first examples has 4.5 times 10 to the 20. You would put 4.5 E20. Okay, so that's what it represents, is the times 10 to the. All right. Okay, so we have that little notation there. So now when we go to type this into our calculator, this will consist of you typing in 6.02. I think we're all good with those buttons. So we will have 6.02, right? Then you're going to go ahead and hit the second button and the x to the -1, because if you look carefully, it has two little e's on top. So you'll push those to get your E. And then you will hit 23. Okay? So once you've written that down, please take a second to try typing that in to make sure that you understand where those buttons are located. You might also, if you are able to see it with your pencil or whatever, you can kind of highlight where these buttons were located so that you know where to find them in the future. So when you go to type it in, you can go 6.02. We're going to hit the second EE, which is the x to the negative 1, so the EE is right on top, and E shows up, then you do 23. Okay? So the nice thing about using this, the reason I'm telling you to embrace it is because you can actually go right into, so that's the answer, right? I can also multiply this by 2, right? And so notice I didn't have to use any parentheses. So I'm trying to keep you from having to use parentheses. Because most likely, especially if you go to try to do this on your phone, you do have an E button. I know how to help iPhone users. I don't know how to help Droid users right now. But you don't have to use parentheses. Parentheses get really complicated when you're dealing with one of those calculators. Okay? So definitely I would embrace that. If you feel very strongly that you want to use parentheses, you can always type in 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. You can always do that. This little portion, you can technically hit second log as well. So you have 2 options, but once again, I recommend use E. Okay, this is what I will always be doing, and there you go. Okay, so, make sure you put parentheses on that if you wrote that down. Down here, anybody recognize this calculator, where it's from? Google, yeah, exactly. All right, so this is your Google calculator. So this is the one that you can definitely rely on at home. So I wanted to point out that this EXP, that is the E button on the Google calculator. Do not click the lowercase e. I think on the phones, some of your phones, it might actually end up being a lowercase e. I know for this, it'll show up as a lowercase e. Don't worry about that. Just use that for the E button, and then it is still being used the same way. Okay? Okay, so that's what I wanted you guys to have for calculator help.